Few things are more gratifying than breaking free from the restraints of society. 2013's Frozen, like The Lion King, is an exceptionally successful Disney movie for doing things that run contrary to Disney's usual morality. In this case, it's to show how satisfying it can be to reject society. Written and co-directed by Jennifer Lee, it's the natural next step following her work on Wreck-It Ralph. Frozen is a more genuine recontextualizing of a villain. Unlike Ralph, Elsa actually does hurt people just by being herself. Elsa as a character, particularly with the song Let It Go, is one of the most powerful things Disney has ever produced. Unfortunately, not everything about the movie works, especially in the final act, in which the story's true villain, Hans, lacks sensible motivations and implies a deeply cynical attitude about human nature. But in addition to Elsa, the film has many good qualities, including its art design and some of its supporting characters. But Elsa's personal struggle is obviously the heart of the film. How do you deal with the knowledge that you're capable of terribly hurting people you care about without intending to? Elsa's parents decide the answer is to lock their daughter away after she nearly kills her little sister. The experience and the response of their parents implies a lesson to Elsa she carries to her adulthood, where she fears the proximity of loved ones. This is a very good, visually beautiful Disney fantasy with resonant themes about how one handles living in a world in which the threat of emotional harm is constant. The film credits Hans Christian Andersen's The Snow Queen as its inspiration, but there's, as you might expect, very little similarity between this film and the story. I do like the original story better, but it doesn't diminish my love for the movie. I bring it up mainly to highlight two differences I consider crucial. The protagonists are peasants in the story and royalty in the film. And in the film, the story's person in need of rescue and the villain are combined. You'll notice I didn't say damsel in distress. That's because the original story is about a girl, Gerda, on a quest to rescue a boy, Kay, who has been seduced by the Snow Queen. He has been made susceptible to the Queen's influence because of two pieces of glass caught in his eye and his heart. Glass, we are told, that originally came from a mirror made by the devil, which could only reflect death or blemishes. So Kay becomes cynical. Ever in search of purity he can no longer see, he becomes very good at numbers, can even add fractions in his head, the story says, and becomes a big hit for his ability to perfectly imitate others, highlighting their shortcomings. Something I thought was a rather insightful comment about the coldly logical nature of comedy. The glass threatens to eventually freeze Kay's heart, which makes him attractive to the Snow Queen. A scene where she gathers him into her cloak on her sleigh as she takes him away inspired a scene from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. In Frozen, the threat of a gradually freezing heart is transferred to the protagonist, named Anna instead of Gerda, voiced by Kristen Bell, the biggest star to lend a voice to this movie. Elsa is played by a Broadway star, Idina Menzel, whose singing voice is quite a bit better than Belle's, though Belle's isn't bad. Anna's heart starts to freeze when Elsa, who is born with the power to create and control ice and snow, accidentally zaps Anna's chest. The freezing heart is entirely a physical ailment in the film and doesn't carry any thematic meaning in terms of Anna's story, other than being cured by an act of true love. The heart of the original story becomes a broader sideline to the much more modern character conflict introduced for Elsa. As anyone who's seen the film will probably tell you, the best scene is when Elsa, banished because her terrible destructive powers have finally been revealed, creates a castle for herself, and she sings about how she's liberated, how she's free now to use her powers. What is she liberated from? Well, let's look at some things in the media that were current at the same time that Frozen was first released. Like Walter White in Breaking Bad, whose cancer liberates him from the falseness of his home and work life, or the characters on Game of Thrones, who operate with unvarnished pragmatism, Elsa is liberated from the artificial constraints of morality. Elsa is the Snow Queen composite, a combination of the victim and the villain. The other crucial difference I mentioned, that the characters are royalty instead of peasants, is partly, I think, simply due to the fact that it's easier for kids and people generally today to identify with royalty. Disney used to make movies about people who lived on farms, but movie-going audiences have shifted away from being able to identify with that lifestyle since the 1930s. Now movies about farms are about farm animals who have few or no chores and have personalities like the children watching, founded on being taken care of. But much like Game of Thrones, where very few of the many characters aren't nobility or royalty, people have an easier time now identifying with the privileges and the guilt of high station. The average person in the US has an unprecedented awareness of the suffering throughout the world maintained along with, and possibly necessary for, their comfortable lives. There's also the awareness that one's lifestyle is responsible for climate change and immediately damaging ecological conditions in other countries. So Elsa's liberation comes with the unintended consequence of putting her kingdom in a permanent state of winter. Frozen was directed by Chris Buck and Jennifer Lee. The film was long in development before Jennifer Lee came aboard. In fact, she didn't join production until 2012, just a year before the film's release, which is hardly any time at all for an animated film like this. But considering how much Wreck-It Ralph and Frozen outshine Disney films from the previous few years, Lee is likely responsible for much of what makes Frozen work. However, it wasn't Lee who decided to shift the story's focus to Elsa. According to an interview from 2013, it was the writing of the song Let It Go by the husband and wife songwriting team of Robert and Kristen Anderson Lopez that led to the film's transformation. Sung by Idina Menzel, the Tony Award winner for her role of Elphaba in Wicked, the song sheds a new light on Elsa. Up until then, Elsa was pretty much a straightforward villain, says Lee. We wanted to know more about her, what she would be like if she could be herself without fear. After that, she was much more complex, more interesting, and sympathetic. The change required Lee to do some rewriting, which she was happy to do. Everything now hangs on the theme of the power of love versus the power of fear, she said. Does it, though? Let It Go could be seen as a song about rejecting fear, but it's also a song about rejecting society. It's Elsa's parents and her consideration for Anna that led to the repression she's now dramatically letting go of. Let It Go is a rejection of love and fear. You could look further to see how the love versus fear dichotomy really isn't present in the film. It's Elsa's caution, substituting for Anna's absent fear, that compels her to forbid Anna's marriage to Hans. The accident that led to Anna's injury earlier in the film might have been prevented had she and Elsa been instilled with some fear regarding the use of Elsa's powers. The film does not successfully portray love and fear as opposites. Instead, they often work in tandem, which is certainly more realistic. I really feel it was an accident that Elsa appealed to the audiences more than Anna did. Anna is much more of the Disney princess mold, unwaveringly optimistic, usually cheerful, and inclined to perceive only the best qualities of people she meets. This is something the film lightly parodies in how quickly she ends up engaged to Hans. It's not exactly fair to previous Disney princesses. None of them are explicitly shown to get engaged to their princes on the same day they meet them, with the possible exception of Cinderella. But as I argued in my Cinderella analysis, Cinderella's marriage is better interpreted as a political one than as a romantic one. Or rather, the romance for Cinderella is not in that she finds a man she absolutely adores, but in that she exchanges the prison of her family for the power and beauty of royal status, which is arguably the same thing Hans is trying to do in Frozen. Initially presented as a basically decent fellow, the movie drastically alters its tone for the character late in the story, when Anna seeks him to heal her frozen heart by giving her true love's kiss. He adopts a sadistic tone as he tells her she need then find someone who loves her, and goes on, like a caricature of a James Bond villain, to outline his plan to marry her and murder Elsa. On the face of it, this doesn't make much sense because we've seen him not only refrain from killing Elsa, but also prevent other people from killing her. Maybe he figures that if Elsa dies, the winter will be permanent, but that's to ascribe motives which the movie makes no attempt to imply. It seems much more likely that Hans was rewritten at a date too late to modify material earlier in the film. Maybe at some point the problem for Anna was not about choosing between a good man and an evil man, but a man for whom her affection grew naturally over time, as opposed to a man who dazzled her with a meet-cute. Which would have been a much subtler and worthier story. As it is, smashing the villain button on Hans late in the game looks like panic and results in a cynical implication. Even though Hans may act like a reasonable person, underneath he's a complete psychopath. And it's true, psychopaths are known for their appealing facades, but this is a children's movie, and Hans isn't merely charming. He's shown taking action out of apparent concern for Anna as well as the kingdom. This isn't so much a message of don't judge a book by its cover, as it is a you should never trust anyone message. In their duet, Hans notably sings about finding a place rather than a person, and we know he has 13 brothers ahead of him in the line of succession. There was nothing odd or even sinister about a prince seeking a marriage with a foreign princess in early modern Europe. In fact, that's why Elizabeth Stuart, the Winter Queen, married Frederick of the Rhine. It was part of James I's project to forge peace between Catholics and Protestants. The idea that neither Elsa nor Anna wouldn't consider political motives in Hans' courtship is much stranger than the idea that they would. In fact, Hans would be completely in his rights to be surprised at Anna's interpretation of their relationship as true love, even after an honestly amiable fraternization. Interestingly, Anna's dialogue with Hans seems to set up his perception of Elsa as a wanton killer.
What happened out there?
Elsa struck me with her powers.
You said she'd never hurt you.
I was wrong. Oh.
Anna.
Any reasonable person hearing this dialogue would interpret Anna's words to mean that Elsa had intentionally used lethal force against her. It's slightly unnatural for Anna to frame it in this way, even accidentally, which hints at a writer's intention to unnaturally manipulate character development. Anna never amends her account either, so right up to the point when Hans is aiming a killing blow at Elsa, and Anna blocks it with her hand, he has good reason to think that Elsa attempted to murder Anna. All of this suggests that he was originally conceived as, at the very least, a more nuanced character. This might have been a film with no true villain at all. But let's go back to Let It Go. It makes a lot of sense that introducing the song to the film required rewrites. Even as it is, it implies some things that aren't really supported elsewhere in the story. Elsa comes back to the conceal, don't feel line we'd heard in an earlier song. But where does this come from? We see her father teaching the line to her like a mantra.
The gloves will help. See? Conceal it, Don't feel it.
Don't let it show.
Presumably, it's so her powers won't get out of control. The trolls advise the family that Elsa should learn to control her power, and it seems that Elsa's parents, out of love and fear, would rather just teach her to repress it. Then there's a line in Let It Go.
You'll never see me cry.
You'll never see me cry. Who is that directed towards? She's not repressing her emotions anymore. Possibly it's to announce that her feelings are now her private property. Possibly it's to say that the joy she finds in her new freedom precludes any chance of tears. It seems in any case to imply that someone wanted to see her cry. Who? Instinctively we think of the parents.
Elsa, what have you done? This is getting out of hand.
I'm scared. It's getting stronger.
Getting upset only makes it worse. Calm down.
No, don't touch me. Please. I don't want to hurt you.
The liberation of the song is so effective that it implies either real abuse or that Elsa's happiness is dependent on her freedom to exercise destructive behavior. Elsa sings about freedom from right and wrong, and about how she's one with the air and the sky. This is very romantic, as in the English literary movement. It might have come from Byron's Manfred, and that's why I think she's a Byronic or satanic heroine. Listen to this portion of a soliloquy from Manfred, and think of how aptly it could be spoken by Elsa after she's fled from her kingdom and is alone on the mountainside. My Mother Earth, and thou fresh breaking day, and you, ye mountains, why are ye beautiful? I cannot love ye, and thou, the bright eye of the universe, that openest over all, and unto all, art a delight. Thou shin'st not on my heart, and you, ye crags, upon whose extreme edge I stand, and on the torrent's brink beneath, behold the tall pines dwindled as to shrubs. In dizziness of distance, when a leap, a stir, a motion, even a breath, would bring my breast upon its rocky bosom's bed, to rest forever. Wherefore do I pause? I feel the impulse, yet I do not plunge. I see the peril, yet do not recede. And my brain reels, and yet my foot is firm. There is a power upon me which withholds and makes it my fatality to live. If it be life to wear within myself this barrenness of spirit, and to be my own soul's sepulchre, for I have ceased to justify my deeds unto myself, the last infirmity of evil. How beautiful is all this visible world, how glorious in its action and itself. But we, who name ourselves its sovereigns, we, half dust, half deity, alike unfit, to sink or soar with our mixed essence make a conflict of its elements, and breathe the breath of degradation and of pride, contending with low wants and lofty will, till our mortality predominates. It's better if you consider how likely it would be that Elsa knows her storm would be doing some damage even before Anna points out Arendelle is frozen over. She's not stupid. She'd have to know kicking off winter in the middle of summer would have consequences. Let It Go has been read as queer-coded, which is not surprising for a song about repressing one's natural urges in order to please one's family. But there are some slightly sexual undertones to the song, too, especially in a line like, "Your perfect girl is gone." That it's accompanied by a shot of Elsa wiggling her hips, a moment mocked in Frozen 2, suggests that there's some sexual behavior included on the menu of her new liberation. She's notably without a romantic partner in the film, Perhaps the implication is simply that she's indulging in her own sex appeal for her own pleasure. There's a certain courage in seeing oneself as sexually appealing. And of course, it's vanity, adding another kind of bad. It feels so good to be. Frozen is available on Disney+.